Hello my quilting friends! Leah Day here with a new Sit Down Quilting Sunday video. Today I'm quilting this cute little hoop quilt with 4 spooky Halloween designs. So I'm getting started quilting a few fall designs. These are all kind of spooky designs to go with Halloween. And it was really kind of fun. I just picked out 4 designs that I thought of. And the first one was a feather, and I just thought, okay, well, I'll just stitch a fun feather and it'll just be a fun design. But then I started thinking about it, and I really wanted to make it somehow spooky. You know, like, how do I make a spooky feather? So here's what I decided to do. Travel stitch back into the feather shape, and I'm going to kind of make it look like a clawing hand is inside of the feather. So here we go. I'm going to come inside, swirl around, kind of make a little hook. Now a few more fingers, kind of a little clawing hand here, just travel stitching back, you know, as if there's a little hand inside that feather that's reaching out to get you. Maybe it's just me, I can see that, but you know, it's one of those funny things. I think it adds a nice little flourish, it fills in that feather shape nicely, and I mean, I have that association of a little clawing hand, so it makes me smile when I see it. But I do think the easier and faster way to stitch it is to go on ahead and knock out all your feather shapes first. So I'm swirling around here, and I really prefer travel back feathers. So travel along the back of that feather shape, swirl out and around, and then hit up against that vine line that I've already established. Then travel stitch back, swirl out and around. And I like the style of feather just simply because it's the same kind of repetitive set of steps, and I don't have to think about it quite so much. There's other ways that you can quilt that, definitely. So I have some other tutorials I'll link up and make sure that you can see how other methods of quilting feathers too. So I'm just going to knock this out all the way down, and this is a mini quilt. It's going to be a hoop quilt. And I know I just need to stitch a little bit beyond my marked circle shape, but really not much beyond it because it's going to get cut off whenever I put this into a hoop. So now I'm going to go back and start filling in with my little claw finger detail, just careful travel stitching. And what I'm doing here is just stitching along that vine line. I come to the point, kind of the tip of the feather. If you think of it as a teardrop, and that's the tip of the teardrop. Swirling out and around, that forms that kind of 3 clawing kind of finger shape. And then careful travel stitching all the way back. And here's the cool thing, even if your travel stitching is messy, stitch back over it. Throw some more thread at it, who cares? It doesn't matter. Just keep on stitching, don't stop and rip anything. There we go. So I'm going to continue knocking out the feathers, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to move on to another funky design. So now I want to stitch just a bit of web fill. And so basically this is spider web, where we're going to stitch it and kind of stack these spider webs together. So I'm going to start by stitching some straight lines and have them all come to a single point. And I usually just do a plus shape and then an X shape right on top. I find that the easiest. I know that's, you know, doesn't really look like a spider web, honestly, but, you know, we're kind of going for a cartoon here. It doesn't have to be actually realistic. So now once I get that base set, I'm going to start bouncing from basically leg to leg of that spider web base, and just kind of bouncing and dipping down with my line as I quilt all the way around it. You can see this is a spiral. So as I'm stitching, I'm also spiraling outward through that entire area. And, you know, sometimes you might notice, like, okay, maybe my line was just a little bit long right there, or maybe it was a little bit short. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Sometimes I do a little bit of travel stitching to bounce around it. In this case, I'm going to continue to hit that line. Here, I'm going to estimate for where that line was and then travel stitch back and forward so that way it comes out to the right height. And then here I'll branch out with that last line. So sometimes you kind of have to just make the shape, the base shape, the right size that you need. So let's travel stitch down, and I'm going to fit one between that first web fill shape and this feather. Let's see here. This looks good. That looks like a good place to start. So I'll stitch my initial plus shape and just kind of fill it in where I think it should go, and then put the X in on top of it. So now I'm just stitching a straight line between all of those first lines. And this is kind of a tight little space. I don't have to really be particular about filling it absolutely perfectly. I just want to bounce around there and give the effect, the illusion of a spider web. That looks good. Might travel stitch in and just do some gently curving lines through that area just to fill it in nicely. You know, when in doubt, you kind of just have to look at your design and decide, okay, well, you know, in the weird areas, I'm just going to fill that in with some curves, and that's going to be good enough. So I like that. That's looking really good. And that's it for web fill. And now let's go into some Oblivion. So this starts out with a gently curving line and then swirl back to create basically an eyeball shape. You know, really, really simple curving shape. Now I'm going to travel stitch to the middle of it and stitch a circle. Now that is a design in and of itself. I call that Ocean Pearls. You can leave it there, or I'm going to punch it up a notch. We're going to make this look like an eyeball. So I'm going to swirl inside with a spiral. It's a closed spiral, so I stitched all the way inside, filling it up completely, and then now I'm travel stitching all the way back out again to get out to the outer edges. Now I'm going to bounce back and forth, filling in that space completely with these bouncy echoes. So this is a design that has a lot of steps. Definitely watch my other tutorial that walks you through it step by step. You know, it's just one of those designs that just has a lot of different things going on with it, but that makes it even more interesting and definitely a cool, creepy design for the fall. So now I'm going to travel stitch all the way back to my starting line, travel stitch over, and I'm going to echo that Oblivion shape. I'm going to hit the tip and echo back. So this is kind of like adding swirling locks of hair around that shape. And I've got this weird area here. I'm just going to fill that in with more gently curving lines. That's really the best choice. Maybe I'll kind of alternate the direction of those lines, have some swirling from this direction. And that way it really looks consistent. It fills it in, adds more texture around my applique design. There we go. Now I'm going to come up around this side, hit that tip again, and now I'm going to start echoing the opposite side. Swirling out and around. You know, the smoother that you can have that gently curving line, the better it will be. So sometimes I'll position my hands like I have here, where I can make that entire movement, and that's about 3 or 4 inches. I can make that entire movement without having to stop and reposition my hands. So that's it. That looks great. That's Oblivion. So our last design is not necessarily spooky, and it does require just a little bit of planning on your quilts. It's called left turn, right turn. And what I'm doing here is basically creating kind of a baseline on my quilt so that way I have nice straight lines and sharp angles. So the rules of the design are simple. You first stitch a left turn, so just an angle going in one direction, then come up and stitch an angle, right angle, going in the other direction. So it's going to be a left turn, well actually that's a right turn, and now a left turn. And this is exactly how I came up with this design. I just actually thought, hey, I wonder what would happen if I stitched a left turn and then a right turn down my quilt. And I stitched it out, and it created this really cool effect. So the effect really gets started when you start adding more lines. So I'm going to travel stitch over, and these lines, I'm not aiming to like stay on them or anything. They're just helping me keep my lines straight across. As now I come back and I interlock the first set of lines with the next set. So here I'm stitching up, and I then come over and I make sure to hit that line before, come up and kind of intersect with my lines in the row before it, and that's what starts creating this really weird asymmetrical grid. I love it. It's one of my favorite designs. I can do that back down, and here's the cool thing is you never know what you're gonna get. I mean, sometimes whenever I put my lines together they form these little weird boxes, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes things line up and it's nice and symmetrical, and sometimes it's just kind of a weird mess. So you really never know what you get, and I think that's what makes it more interesting, you know, and sometimes you have to just kind of look at it and travel stitch in and kind of just add a few lines randomly if you have a space that's left over and that's just a little bit too big. But I think that's a good choice for having several different really curvy line designs. I think left turn, right turn was a good choice here because it added almost like a brickwork kind of texture and super easy to stitch. And here's what it looks like whenever I finished my candy corn mini. So that's it for this video. I love how this mini quilt came out, and I'm so excited. I finished it before the end of fall. That makes me feel really, really good. I'm usually really bad about decorating. You know, most of the time, my Halloween or holiday quilt, whatever I'm making, it's usually done like by the next year, and that's doing pretty good. So I feel awesome about this, getting my little candy corn quilt finished, and it's already ready to hang up on the wall. If you'd like to learn about making hoop quilts like this, check out my podcast episode with Anne-Marie Cheney. She wrote a pattern called Hoop Quilts and details how to actually create the quilt, put it in the hoop, put binding on the edges, all of that and more. So definitely check out her pattern to learn more about hoop quilts. If you'd like to learn more about the machine I'm using in these tutorials, you can find more about it at leahday.com/grace. It's an excellent machine. I love using it, and I'm going to be moving it to a quilting frame in the next few weeks. So this is it set up as a sit-down long arm, meaning I'm still moving the quilt just like a home machine, but I will be moving it to a quilting frame very soon. So learn more about it and learn how you can get a discount on your machine, whatever quilting setup that you decide to get, if you call the company and live within the United States. So learn more about that at leahday.com/grace. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you don't miss the next video coming out soon. Until next time, let's go quilt.